The espresso machine behind me hissed like an irate feline as I expertly balanced 3 plates along my forearm. A skill honed over 4 years of waitressing at Bellini's. The restaurant throbbed with the energy of a typical Friday night crowd. Businessmen shedding their ties after a grueling week, couples intimately huddled over candlelight, and the occasional tourist who had stumbled in from the rain-soaked streets of North Beach, San Francisco's Little Italy. Table 7 was still awaiting their tiramisu. "Emma," Marco called from the kitchen pass, his voice barely cutting through Pavarotti's tenor emanating from hidden speakers. "Coming," I responded, forcing a smile despite the ache that was radiating across my lower back. 12 hours into a double shift, my feet were screaming with every step on the polished hardwood floor. The mandatory uniform of black non-slip shoes, a crisp white button-up shirt, and a pencil skirt had long since ceased to provide any semblance of comfort. I delivered the plates to table 12, a family with children who had already spilled water twice, before hurrying back to collect the dessert. The night stretched endlessly before me. 3 more hours until I could return to my minuscule studio apartment, where bills waited in a neat, terrifying stack on my kitchen counter. Rent was due in 5 days, and I was still $200 short. The front door chimed, and a gust of cold air swept through the restaurant, bringing with it the scent of rain and expensive cologne. Something in the atmosphere shifted, a sudden tension, as if the air pressure had changed. Conversations died down. I didn't turn immediately, too focused on carefully placing the tiramisu in front of a silver-haired woman who barely acknowledged my existence. "Mr. Russo," I heard Giacomo, the restaurant owner, exclaim with unusual deference. What an unexpected honor! My curiosity finally got the better of me. I glanced toward the entrance and nearly dropped my serving tray. 3 men stood in the doorway. 2 were broad-shouldered figures in dark suits, their eyes scanning the restaurant with mechanical precision. But it was the man between them who commanded attention. Tall, with shoulders that filled out an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, was swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble, all sharp angles and shadows. He wasn't conventionally handsome, too severe for that, but he possessed a power that made everything else in the room fade into background noise. Giacomo was personally escorting them to the best table in the house, the corner booth partially concealed by a decorative wine rack that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entire restaurant. I'd seen important people seated there before. Local politicians, tech billionaires, but never anyone who caused Giacomo's hands to tremble as he pulled out chairs. "That's Victor Russo," whispered Lily, another waitress who had materialized beside me. "Don't stare." "Who?" I asked, still watching as the man slid into the booth with feline grace, his security taking positions nearby rather than sitting. "You don't know?" Lily's eyes widened. "Owner of half the city, probably. Nobody really knows what he does, but everyone knows not to ask." She tugged at my sleeve. "And nobody wants to serve his table. Guess who's up in the rotation?" My stomach dropped. "No, please switch with me. I'm exhausted and can't." "Giacomo's watching. Just don't screw up." She gave me a sympathetic pat before disappearing into the kitchen. I took a deep breath, straightened my already straight apron, and approached the table. Each step closer felt like wading deeper into dangerous waters, though I couldn't explain why. The man, Russo, was studying the wine list with casual indifference. Up close, I noticed his hands, strong, with a thin scar across the knuckles of his right hand. A heavy platinum watch gleamed on his wrist. "Good evening," I said, proud that my voice remained steady. "Welcome to Bellini's. Can I start you with something to drink?" Dark eyes flicked up to mine, and the full force of his attention hit me like a physical blow. His gaze was assessing, almost predatory, as if he could read every worry, every fear, every secret I'd ever kept with a single look. I fought the urge to step back. "The 2010 Brunello de Montalcino," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft, but carrying a note of authority that suggested he rarely needed to raise it to be obeyed. "And water. No ice." I nodded, writing it down unnecessarily. There was no chance I would forget his order. Would you like to hear about our specials this evening? No. He closed the menu and handed it to me without looking at it again. Bring the wine, then I'll order. I retreated to the bar, my heart hammering against my ribs. The bartender, sensing my distress, raised an eyebrow. Russo wants the 2010 Brunello, I said. The bartender whistled low. $300 a bottle. Must be nice. He reached for a key that opened the temperature-controlled cabinet where they kept the most expensive wines. Don't spill it, he added with a wink. I carried the wine back with exaggerated care, conscious of every step on the now seemingly treacherous floor. Russo was speaking quietly on a cell phone, one of two visible on the table, but ended the call as I approached. I presented the bottle for his inspection, going through the ritual with hands that trembled slightly. When he nodded his approval, I began opening it, acutely aware of his eyes on me. You're new, he stated, rather than asked. I've been here 4 years, I replied, focusing on the cork. Not at my table. I glanced up, surprised by the possessive phrasing. No, sir, not at your table. A ghost of a smile touched his lips before vanishing so quickly I might have imagined it. I poured a small amount for him to taste, holding my breath as he swirled it, inhaled its bouquet, and took a sip. His approval came with a slight nod, and I filled his glass before stepping back. I'll have the osso buco, he said, and the chef knows how I prefer it. Of course. I turned to go, relieved to have completed the interaction without incident. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. One of the busboys rushed past with a tub of dishes, his shoulder catching mine. I stumbled forward, my serving tray tilting. The water pitcher I'd balanced there slid, toppled, and before I could catch it, ice-cold water and a half-full cup of coffee from another table cascaded directly onto Mr. Russo's lap and down the front of his suit. Silence fell like a guillotine. The entire restaurant froze. The security men stepped forward, their hands moving inside their jackets. Russo himself remained perfectly still, looking down at the dark stains spreading across what was undoubtedly a suit that cost more than I made in 3 months. I'm so sorry, I gasped, mortified, grabbing napkins from a nearby table. It was an accident. Stop. His voice was quiet, but it cut through my panic like a knife. He took the napkins from my trembling hands. Accidents happen. His calm reaction was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. I became aware of Giacomo hurrying over, his face ashen. Mr. Russo, please accept my deepest apologies. The meal is on the house, of course, and we will pay for any cleaning or replacement. Russo raised a hand, silencing him mid-sentence. It's fine, Giacomo. An accident. His eyes never left mine, and I found I couldn't look away. What's your name? Emma, I whispered. Emma-chan, he nodded, as if committing it to memory. Emma, bring me a towel with the check. I'll return another time. I fled to the bathroom, grabbing clean towels, my mind racing with visions of unemployment. When I returned, he accepted them with surprising grace, dabbed at his suit, and then stood. He was taller than I'd realized, towering over me. He signed the check without examining it, leaving what I later discovered was a $1,000 tip, and then departed with his security detail, moving through the restaurant like a shark through still water. Giacomo didn't fire me, though. I spent the rest of my shift enduring his lectures and the pitying glances of my coworkers. By the time I locked my apartment door behind me at 1 a.m., I was too exhausted to even cry, collapsing fully clothed onto my bed. I awoke to knocking. Harsh, insistent knocking that pulled me from a dream of drowning in coffee. Sunlight streamed through the blinds I'd forgotten to close, and a glance at my phone showed it was just past 9 a.m. I never had visitors, especially not on Saturday mornings. The knocking came again. I stumbled to the door of my studio apartment, ran my fingers through my tangled hair, and peered through the peephole. 2 men in dark suits stood in the hallway, the same men who had flanked Victor Russo the night before. My heart stuttered. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but one of them looked directly at the peephole as if sensing my presence. Miss Chun, he called. Mr. Russo requests your presence. I cracked the door open, keeping the security chain engaged. Why? He'll explain himself. The man's face remained impassive. A car is waiting. I'm not going anywhere, I said, fear giving my voice a sharpness I didn't feel. I have work at noon. Your employer has been informed you won't be coming in today. He handed me a business card through the crack in the door. It was heavy cardstock embossed with just a name and phone number. Call him if you don't believe me. My stomach twisted. Whatever power this man held, he'd used it to rearrange my life without my knowledge or consent. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That a rich man had sent his employees to invite me somewhere? That didn't sound like a crime, even if everything in me screamed danger. I need to change, I said finally. You have 15 minutes. The man checked his watch. We'll wait here. I closed the door, leaning against it as panic threatened to overwhelm me. I called Bellini's with shaking fingers. Emma, don't worry about it, Marco said when I reached him. Giacomo got a call from Mr. Russo's office this morning. Said you're helping with some event planning thing for him. Paid your full week's salary to Giacomo directly. You're covered. Event planning? I'd never planned an event in my life. Did they say when I'd be back? I asked, my voice small. Take all the time you need, apparently. Marco sounded impressed. Lucky break. Honestly, after last night, I thought you were done for. I hung up, more frightened than reassured. Russo had created a plausible cover story and ensured I wouldn't lose income. Gestures that might seem generous if they weren't so calculated. And if I'd been given any choice in the matter. With no good options, I showered quickly and dressed in the nicest clothes I owned. Dark jeans, a blue blouse, and a cardigan that had seen better days. I tied my long black hair into a neat ponytail, applied minimal makeup to hide the shadows under my eyes, and grabbed my purse and keys. The men escorted me downstairs, where a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb, drawing curious glances from my neighbors. The interior smelled of leather and the same expensive cologne I'd noticed last night. One of the men opened the rear door, and I slid in, half expecting to find Russo himself waiting. Instead, the back seat was empty. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my apartment building recede in the window, a sense of foreboding settling over me. What could a man like Victor Russo possibly want with a waitress who'd spilled coffee on him? Revenge seemed petty for someone of his apparent status, but I couldn't imagine any benevolent reason for this summons. The SUV wound through the city, eventually climbing into the hills above the bay, where houses grew larger and further apart, hidden behind gates and hedges. We finally turned into a private drive, approaching an imposing set of wrought iron gates that opened silently at our approach. Beyond them, a winding driveway led to what could only be described as a modern fortress. A massive house of stone, steel, and glass perched on the hillside, offering what must be breathtaking views of the city and bay below. The car stopped at the front entrance, where a woman in a tailored pantsuit waited. She looked to be in her 40s, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, a tablet in her hand. Miss Chun, she greeted me as I stepped out. I'm Diana, Mr. Russo's house manager. Please follow me. I followed her into a soaring entryway with marble floors and a curved staircase. The interior was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and strategic lighting highlighting what appeared to be museum-quality art. She led me through to a sun-filled room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Wait here, she instructed. Mr. Russo will join you shortly. When she left, I stood awkwardly in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything. The space felt curated rather than lived in, like a high-end hotel suite. I gravitated toward the windows, taking in the panoramic view of San Francisco spread out below. From this height, the city looked like a toy model, boats cutting white trails through the blue bay. Beautiful, isn't it? I whirled around. Victor Russo stood in the doorway, watching me. Gone was the formal suit from last night, replaced by dark trousers and a light gray cashmere sweater that somehow made him look more intimidating rather than less. In daylight, I could see his eyes were a deep brown, almost black, framed by lashes that seemed unfairly thick for a man. "Why am I here?" I asked, deciding directness was my only defense. He moved into the room with that same fluid grace I'd noticed before, like a predator conserving energy. Straight to the point. "I appreciate that." He gestured to a seating area. "Please sit." I remained standing. "I'd prefer if you answered my question." A smile touched his lips, genuine this time, as if my defiance amused him. "I have a proposition for you, Emma-chan. One I think you'll find difficult to refuse." My throat went dry. "A proposition?" I echoed, the words sounding ominous in the cavernous space. "Sit," he repeated, this time with an edge that made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. He lowered himself into an armchair, his movements controlled and precise. I perched on the edge of the sofa across from him, poised to run, though I had nowhere to go. My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited for him to continue. "I assume you're curious why you're here," he said, studying me with unnerving intensity. "Most people in your position would be." "In what position?" I managed. "Someone who's caught my attention." A chill ran down my spine. "Because I ruined your suit?" That hint of a smile again. "The suit is replaceable. My tailor has already been notified." He leaned forward slightly. "I did some research on you last night, Emma. 26 years old. Parents deceased, car accident when you were 19. Art school dropout due to financial constraints. For different addresses in the past 5 years, each apartment smaller than the last. Currently 3 months behind on student loans and—" He glanced at his watch. 5 days from eviction if your rent check bounces again." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How did you?" "Information is a commodity, like anything else." He waved a hand dismissively. "What interests me is that, despite your circumstances, you have no criminal record. Not even a parking ticket. You work double shifts at a restaurant where customers rarely remember your name. You send money every month to your younger brother at UC Berkeley. Money you can't afford to give." The mention of my brother sent a spike of fear through me. "Leave Michael out of whatever this is." Russo's expression softened fractionally. "I have no interest in your brother except to note your loyalty to him. It speaks to your character." A woman entered with a tray of coffee and placed it on the table between us. I stared at the liquid, remembering last night's disaster, unable to appreciate the irony. "I need someone trustworthy for a particular role," Russo continued once we were alone again. "Someone without connections to my usual circles. Someone who wouldn't appear on anyone's radar." "What role?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He poured coffee into 2 delicate porcelain cups. "I need a fiancé." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me? A fiancé?" He repeated calmly, offering me a cup which I didn't take. "For appearance purposes only, of course. You would pretend to be engaged to me." The absurdity of the situation momentarily overwhelmed my fear. "Why would someone like you need a fake fiancé?" Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, though not directed at me. "My reasons are my own. What matters is what I'm offering in return." He set down his cup and named a figure that made me gasp audibly. "That would be monthly," he clarified. "For a minimum commitment of 6 months, all expenses paid, of course. You'd live here, have a clothing allowance, a car at your disposal. Your brother's tuition would be covered through graduation." My mind reeled. The amount he'd mentioned would clear all my debts and still leave more money than I'd ever had at once. But nothing came without strings, especially not from a man like this. "What would be expected of me?" I asked carefully. "Attendance at social functions, learning appropriate etiquette, creating the convincing appearance of a woman in love." His gaze was clinical, assessing. "Nothing physical. You would have your own suite in this house, your privacy respected." I frowned, skepticism cutting through my shock. "If all you need is a woman on your arm, you could hire an actress. Someone beautiful, polished, someone who already knows which fork to use." For the first time, something like genuine amusement crossed his features. "Precisely why you're perfect. No one would believe I'd choose a sophisticated socialite or model." My interest in someone like you, unpolished, ordinary, that would be unexpected. People are less likely to question the unexpected. His words stung even as I recognized their truth. I was ordinary, invisible to men like him under normal circumstances. Who exactly would we be trying to convince? I pressed. Business associates, family. He sipped his coffee. My grandmother, specifically. She's dying pancreatic cancer. Her last wish is to see me settled. She worries about me. A muscle in his jaw tightened. I don't want her final months consumed with this concern. It sounded almost noble if I squinted hard enough. Almost human. But something didn't add up. So, you're doing this for your grandmother's peace of mind? I asked skeptically. His expression hardened. My motivations aren't your concern. Your answer, however, is yes or no, Emma. I stood abruptly, wrapping my arms around myself. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning, he said, rising as well. He towered over me, his presence filling the room. Diana will show you around. Answer practical questions. My driver will take you home this evening. And if I say no? His eyes met mine, unflinching. Then you'll be driven home, and we'll never see each other again. You'll receive compensation for today's inconvenience. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Emma. This conversation, everything about this arrangement is confidential. I value my privacy. Breaching that would have consequences. The threat lingered in the air between us as he left. I remained frozen until Diana reappeared moments later, tablet in hand, her professional smile firmly in place. Shall we begin the tour? She asked, as if showing potential fake fiancés around was a regular part of her duties. The next few hours passed in a daze as she led me through the mansion. My private suite, should I accept the offer, would include a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, a bathroom with a tub I could actually lie down in, a walk-in closet, and a sitting room with a balcony overlooking the gardens. Other areas included a gym, a pool, a cinema room, a library filled with books that appeared to have been read rather than chosen for their spines, and a kitchen where a private chef prepared all meals. Mr. Russo rarely uses most of these spaces, Diana explained as we walked through a formal dining room that could seat 20. He prefers his private office in the library. Does he live here alone? I asked, trying to build a picture of the man who had so thoroughly upended my Saturday. The household staff includes myself, the chef, 2 housekeepers, a groundskeeper, and security personnel. Mr. Russo's personal assistant works primarily from the downtown office but has rooms here when required. Her answer was polished, revealing nothing personal. No family, friends? Diana's expression remained neutral. Mr. Russo values his privacy. As he mentioned, his social calendar is primarily business-related. By late afternoon, my head was spinning with information. Schedules, security protocols, expectations for a woman in my potential position. Diana had been thorough but impersonal, treating the whole thing like a business arrangement, which I supposed it was. As promised, a driver took me home at sunset. I sat in the back of the same black SUV, watching the city lights emerge as we descended from the hills, feeling as though I'd stepped into someone else's life for a day. In my tiny apartment, everything looked shabbier than when I'd left. The constant drip of the bathroom faucet I couldn't afford to fix, the second-hand furniture, the walls thin enough that I could hear my neighbors arguing through them. On my kitchen counter, the stack of bills seemed to have multiplied in my absence. I called my brother, needing to hear a familiar voice. Hey, Michael answered, the background noise suggesting he was at a cafe or the library. What's up? Just checking in, I said, trying to sound normal. How's the study group going? Good. We're prepping for midterms. He paused. Everything okay? You sound weird. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Michael had no idea how precarious our situation was. I'd shielded him from that reality, insisting he focus on his education while I handled the finances. The money I sent each month barely covered his share of rent in the house he shared with 4 other students, but it was all I could manage. Just tired. I lied. Double shift yesterday. You work too hard, he said, the concern in his voice making him sound older than 21. Seriously, Em. You should be painting, not serving pasta to rich jerks. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maybe someday. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, head in my hands. 6 months pretending to be in love with a dangerous, powerful man I didn't know. 6 months living in a glass castle on a hill. 6 months of lies but also financial security. My brother's education guaranteed. Maybe even a chance to save enough to return to art school myself someday. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning between nightmares of drowning, coffee, and dreams at 24 minutes and 45 seconds of painting again. My hands finally steady and free from the constant tremor of exhaustion. Morning arrived, the gray light seeping through my blinds, and a decision settled in my chest, heavy as a stone. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, choosing a simple black dress, the only formal thing I owned, the dress I'd worn to my parents' funeral. The knock came right on time at 9 a.m. Same driver, same car. This time, when we pulled up to the mansion, Russo was waiting in the same sun-drenched room, gazing out at the view, hands clasped behind his back. He turned at 25 minutes and 19 seconds as I walked in, his face an absolute blank. Your answer? He asked, diving right in without any preamble. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Yes, but I have conditions. Something that looked a whole lot like respect flickered across his face. Name them. I want everything in writing. The payment amounts, the duration, what's expected of me. I made myself meet his gaze, holding steady. My brother stays out of this. No research, no contact, no getting him involved in any way, shape, or form. He nodded. That was fair. Reasonable. Anything else? When this is over, it's completely over. No lingering obligations, no further contact. Agreed, he said, and then added, I have conditions of my own. I assumed you would. He motioned to the sofa, and this time I actually sat down. He stayed standing, maybe to keep that power dynamic in place. You will be convincing in this role, he began. You'll learn what you need to know about me, my business interests, how someone in your position would actually behave. You'll dress, speak, and carry yourself appropriately for someone associated with me. I nodded slowly, taking it all in. You will not go into areas of the house 26 minutes and 30 seconds that are marked as private. You will not try to dig up information about my business dealings. You will not start any relationships on your own with my associates. His voice got harder. And you absolutely will not, under any circumstances, speak to the press or tell anyone about our arrangement. Not during and not after. The terms felt restrictive, controlling, but honestly not entirely unexpected. When do we start? I asked. We already have. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. This makes it official. He opened it to show a 27 minutes and 5 seconds diamond ring that caught the sunlight, turning it into little rainbows all over the ceiling. The stone was big, but not gaudy, set in platinum with smaller diamonds on each side. Your grandmother will believe you bought this just for me? I asked, sounding doubtful. My grandmother will believe I found someone who makes me happy. He took the ring out of its box. Your hand, Emma, he said, almost hesitant. I held out my left hand. His fingers were surprisingly warm and gentle as he slid the ring into place. It fits perfectly, which 27 minutes and 37 seconds should be impossible. How did you know my size? I asked, staring at the strange thing now on my finger. The same way I know everything else. His voice was matter-of-fact, no emotion at all. Information is power. A shiver went down my spine at the reminder of how thoroughly he'd looked into my whole life in less than a day. We have work to do, he went on. Diana has scheduled a stylist for this afternoon. You'll need a wardrobe that fits the part. Tomorrow, 28 minutes and 4 seconds, an etiquette consultant will start your training. He checked his watch. I have meetings downtown, but I'll be back for dinner. We should start putting our story together. Our story? Like how we met, fell in love, the proposal? His face stayed all business. Details matter, Emma. The more specific, the more believable. With that, he left me standing alone in that huge room, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the ring on my hand. I looked out at the city below, at the life I knew, which now seemed as far away as those tiny 28 minutes and 38 seconds cars moving on the streets down there like ribbons. Whatever I'd just agreed to, there was definitely no turning back. The next few days went by in a blur of activity. The stylist showed up with racks of clothes for fittings, dresses, suits, casual wear, everything in muted, expensive fabrics. The etiquette consultant, a former diplomat's wife, drilled me on everything from table settings to how to address people properly. A security briefing, very discreet, outlined the protocols I had to follow. No posting on social media, never traveling without approved security, 29 minutes and 11 seconds never answering questions about Russo's business. Through all of it, I barely saw my so-called fiancé. He left early in the morning, came back late at night, and when we did talk, it was short, like a clinic exchange of information, nothing like the get-to-know-you conversations that normal couples would have. Until the fifth night, when Diana told me Mr. Russo wanted me to be in the main dining room at 8 o'clock for dinner. I got dressed in one of my new outfits, a simple navy dress that cost more than 3 months of my old rent, 29 minutes and 41 seconds, and headed downstairs, my stomach twisting with nerves. The dining room was lit by candles, the long table set for just two at one end. Russo stood up when I came in. An old-fashioned thing to do, and it caught me off guard for a second. "Emma," he said, and for the first time he looked almost unsure. "Thank you for joining me." As I sat down, it hit me that this wasn't just dinner. This was the start of the performance, the first scene in a play that neither of us had written, but we'd both 30 minutes and 12 seconds agreed to be in. And from the intensity in his dark eyes as he looked at me across the candlelight, I had a feeling the real show was about to start. The chef served a meal that would have cost a week's salary at Bellini's. Delicate scallops, roasted duck with cherry sauce, seasonal vegetables prepared in ways I couldn't even name. I ate carefully, very aware of how I was sitting, where my silverware was, and taking small sips of wine like the etiquette consultant had taught me. Russo watched me with that same 30 minutes and 42 seconds unnerving intensity, like he was cataloging every single thing I did. "You're a quick study," he said after they cleared the main course. "I've had practice adapting to new places," I said, setting my napkin next to my plate. "When my parents died, nothing felt familiar anymore. You learn to watch, to copy what other people do." Something flickered in his eyes, maybe some kind of recognition. "Tell me about your art." The question caught me by surprise. "How did you?" "Your brother mentioned it when I spoke with him." My blood ran cold. "You 31 minutes and 14 seconds spoke to Michael? After you specifically said you wouldn't, before we even made this agreement." His voice stayed calm. "Reasonable. Yesterday afternoon, I had him brought to my office downtown." Brought. The word hung there between us, heavy with everything it implied. "Invited," he clarified, even though it didn't seem to make much of a difference. "I explained that you and I had met, that things had moved quickly, that your financial problems were now being taken care of, including his education." My hands curled into fists under the table. And he believed that? That I'd 31 minutes and 48 seconds suddenly fallen for some stranger and kept it a secret? He was skeptical, Russo admitted, until I showed him this. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a photo of us in the garden. Me looking up at him, the sun in my hair, his hand on the small of my back. It was expertly photoshopped, but it showed an intimacy that had never really happened. "You faked evidence," I said, my voice barely there. "To trick my brother. To protect our story," he corrected. "Your brother is the one person most likely to question your sudden 32 minutes and 20 seconds change in circumstances. Now he won't." I pushed the phone back across the table, feeling disgusted. "Did you threaten him, too?" "There was no need for threats. He was worried about you, of course, but mostly relieved about his tuition. He asked if you were happy." Russo's eyes locked with mine. I assured him you were. Anger flared up, hot and unexpected. "You had no right." "I had every right," he snapped back, his voice sharper than it had been. This arrangement only works if we're both fully committed. Your 32 minutes and 51 seconds brother is now part of our story, whether you like it or not. The dessert arrived. Some elaborate chocolate and berry thing that I couldn't even bring myself to touch. We sat there in tense silence until the staff left the room. "You're angry," he said, watching me as he swirled the ruby-colored wine in his glass. "You manipulated my brother, got him involved without asking me." "Yes," he said, not even trying to deny it. "And I'd do it again. This isn't a game, Emma. People in my 33 minutes and 18 seconds position have enemies. If our relationship isn't believable, those enemies might use you to get to me." Fear went down my spine. What kind of enemies? His face closed up, like a gate slamming shut. "The kind you don't want to meet because of my business. The business you won't talk about. I'm a businessman with interests in real estate, shipping, and private equity." The practiced answer just rolled off his tongue. "That's all you need to know. That's what I'm supposed to tell people 33 minutes and 46 seconds when they ask what my fiancé does," I said, challenging him. "Yes, and they will believe you, because most women in love don't ask where the money comes from." His eyes were intense. "Can you do that, Emma? Can you look someone in the eye and lie convincingly?" I met his stare head-on. "I'm sitting across from you pretending that I want to be here. What do you think?" To my surprise, he laughed, a real sound that changed his face, made the hard lines softer, showed a glimpse of someone younger, less 34 minutes and 15 seconds burdened. "Touché," he said, raising his glass a little. "Maybe you'll be better at this than I thought." The tension between us eased up just a little. I took a small bite of dessert, the rich chocolate melting on my tongue. "My grandmother wants to meet you," he said after a minute. "Sunday brunch. She lives in Nob Hill." My stomach got tight. "So soon?" "Her health is getting worse. The doctors say she has 3 months, maybe 4. I nodded slowly. "What should I know about her?" "Elisa Russo, 82, widow for 20 years. She was born in Sicily, but she came to San Francisco when she was a kid. She's traditional in a lot of ways, but not as conventional as you might think." His voice got softer when he talked about her. "She'll ask about your family, where you came from. We should get our stories straight. How much of the truth should I tell?" "As much as you can. Lies are easier to keep up when they're close to the truth." For the next hour, we built our fake romance. How we'd met at a charity event, not at 35 minutes and 20 seconds Bellini's. How he'd been drawn to my realness. How I'd been hesitant but eventually won over by how persistent he was. The proposal had been private, at sunset on the terrace overlooking the bay. Romantic but believable. As the details piled up, I found myself watching his hands while he talked, the way they moved so precisely, the small scar on his knuckles catching the candlelight. I wondered how he'd gotten it, what other marks his body had under those expensive clothes, what stories they 35 minutes and 52 seconds might tell about the man behind that careful exterior. "You're staring," he said, snapping me out of my thoughts. I flushed, embarrassed at getting caught. "I was just thinking that for this to work, I should know more about you. Real things, not just the story we're telling everyone else." He thought about it, then nodded. "That's fair. What do you want to know?" I picked my questions carefully. "Do you have siblings?" "A younger sister, Sophia. She lives in Europe with her husband. We're 36 minutes and 25 seconds not close." His answer was short, like there was a story there he didn't want to get into. "Parents? My father died when I was 17. My mother remarried and lives in Phoenix. We talk now and then." Again, the shortness suggested that things were complicated. I tried a different approach. "What do you do when you're not working? Hobbies? Interests?" Something like amusement crossed his face. "You think I have hobbies? Everyone has something." He was quiet for a minute. "I box 3 mornings a week with a former champion. I read 37 minutes and 3 seconds, mostly history. And I collect art, though I think you've probably noticed that." Yeah, I had. The house was full of museum-quality pieces, abstract expressionists, modernists, a few classical landscapes. "The Rothko in the library," I said. "Is it real?" His eyebrows went up a little. You know Rothko? I was an art student, remember? The reminder felt bitter on my tongue. Before I had to drop out. Yes, it's real. He looked at me with new interest. What did you work in? Oils mostly. Some mixed media. I looked away, 37 minutes and 41 seconds, the memory of making art still painful, like pushing on a bruise. It doesn't matter now. It matters if it's important to you. The unexpected gentleness in his voice made me look up. For a second, he almost looked like he felt sorry for me, before that cool control came back. There's a studio on the 3rd floor, he said, standing up from the table. It's not being used. You can have it if you want. Before I could say anything, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his face getting hard. 38 minutes and 19 seconds. I have to take this. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left me sitting alone in that huge dining room, the candles burning low, and I wondered if that little moment of humanity I'd seen had been real, or just part of the act. The next morning, Diana showed me to the studio, a big room with windows facing north for the best light, empty except for some basic furniture and dusty easels. It looked like someone had used it a long time ago, but Russo hadn't said who. Mr. Russo has told me to order any 38 minutes and 49 seconds supplies you need, she said, already holding her tablet. Just give me a list. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, leaving tracks in the dust. Why is he doing this? Diana's professional face slipped for just a second, and I saw something that looked like sympathy. Mr. Russo has his reasons for everything he does. It's not my place to ask. But he's a man of his word. Whatever you two have agreed to, he'll do it. After she left, I stood in that empty space, picturing it 39 minutes and 23 seconds full of canvases. The smell of turpentine and linseed oil, the chance to create something again after so long, felt like a dangerous gift. Another chain keeping me tied to this deal, to this house, to him. The week went by in a blur of getting ready. A personal shopper brought more clothes, just for meeting Russo's grandmother. Hair stylist, manicurist, makeup artist. I was being made over, polished up like a rough stone, my sharp edges smoothed away. I'd started thinking of him by his first name, 39 minutes and 57 seconds Victor, necessary for the lie we were creating, but he was rarely around. When he was, we practiced our story, adding details, making sure everything matched up. Every time felt like building a character for a play, but the stage was real life and there wouldn't be any curtain call. Sunday arrived, with fog rolling over the bay, covering the view from my windows. I dressed carefully in a knee-length cream dress with a cashmere cardigan, modest, elegant, the kind of thing a grandmother would like. The diamond ring felt heavier today, its 40 minutes and 31 seconds presence a constant reminder of the performance to come. Victor was waiting in the foyer, dressed more casually than I'd seen him before, tailored pants and a navy sweater that made him look less intimidating. He checked me out, his eyes critical. You look appropriate, he said, which I guess was as close to a compliment as he got. Remember, my grandmother is very perceptive. She'll be watching how we act. I know my part, I said, trying not to sound nervous. The drive to Nob Hill was quiet, the tension 41 minutes and 4 seconds building with every block. The security guys, 2 of them in the front seat, kept their eyes on the road, but I could feel them watching everything I did, every word I said. Victor's grandmother lived in an old mansion from San Francisco's golden age, smaller than his modern place, but it had an old-world elegance. As we got to the entrance, Victor took my hand, his grip strong, warm. The simple touch sent a shiver through me. Ready? He asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He 41 minutes and 39 seconds squeezed my hand once. I couldn't tell if it was to reassure me or warn me. Before we went inside, I could smell lemon polish and fresh flowers. A housekeeper led us to a sunroom in the back of the house, where a small, elegant woman was sitting in a wingback chair, wrapped in a fine cashmere blanket. Even though the room was warm, she had a blanket on. Her white hair was perfect, her posture regal, but I could see that she was sick in her pale skin, and her hands trembled just a little. Nona, Victor said. His voice softer 42 minutes and 12 seconds than I'd ever heard it, He went over and kissed her cheek. "How are you feeling today?" "Better now that you're here." Her voice had an accent, but it was clear. Her eyes were sharp as they moved from him to me. "And this must be the woman who's finally captured my grandson's heart." Victor motioned for me to come over. "Emma-chan, this is my grandmother, Elisa Russo." I took a step closer, holding out my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Russo." She didn't take my hand. She reached 42 minutes and 47 seconds for my face instead. Her fingers cool on my cheek. "Let me look at you, dear." I stood still while she looked me over, knowing that Victor was watching both of us. "Beautiful," she said finally. "Not in the obvious way like those models you used to bring around, Victorio. Something more interesting here." She patted the seat next to her. "Sit. Tell me how you met my impossible grandson." For the next hour, we went through our carefully rehearsed story. I talked about the charity event, how he kept asking me out, how I was hesitant at first. Victor added details, sometimes putting his 43 minutes and 22 seconds hand over mine. His thumb brushing over my knuckles like he was being loving, but it felt more like a reminder of our deal. Elisa watched us with those sharp eyes, not missing a thing. "And what did your family think, Emma, about this whirlwind romance?" "My parents passed away a few years ago," I said, the truth easier than making something up. "But my brother Michael has met Victor. He was surprised, but he's happy for me." "Surprised?" she said, smiling a little. "I can imagine. My grandson isn't known for settling down." 43 minutes and 56 seconds, she turned to Victor. "How many women have you brought to meet me over the years, Victorio?" "None," he admitted. "None," she said, sounding pleased. She took my hand, looking at the ring. "My husband's mother's diamond. I wondered if I'd ever see it on someone's finger again." I looked at Victor, surprised. He hadn't said the ring was a family heirloom. His face didn't show anything, but I could feel the tension in his shoulders. "It's beautiful," I 44 minutes and 30 seconds said, feeling like a fraud, which I definitely was. "It belongs on the hand of a woman who loves my grandson for himself, not his bank accounts." Her eyes were piercing. "Do you love him, Emma-chan?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. I could feel Victor tense up beside me, but his face didn't change. I looked at him, really looked at him, at his strong face, the gray at his temples, the control he always had. Then I looked back at his grandmother, a dying woman whose last 45 minutes and 5 seconds wish was to see her grandson happy. "I do," I said softly. The lie was easier than I thought it would be. He's not an easy man to know, but once you do. I let my voice trail off, like I couldn't say how I really felt. Elisa's face softened, her eyes getting misty. "Good, that's good. He needs someone who sees past the walls he puts up." After brunch, as we were getting ready to leave, she asked to talk to Victor alone. I waited in the foyer, looking at the family 45 minutes and 35 seconds photos on an antique table. Victor as a serious kid, a teenage girl who must have been his sister, an older man with Victor's eyes and jawline who I guessed was his father. When Victor came back, his face didn't show anything, but something had changed. He was quieter on the drive home, lost in his own thoughts. Back at the mansion, as we walked into the foyer, I finally broke the silence. "Did she believe us?" He stopped, turning to me. "Yes, good." I moved to walk past him, but he 46 minutes and 6 seconds took my arm, his grip gentle but firm. "You were convincing," he said, looking at my face. "Maybe too convincing. Isn't that what you wanted? A perfect performance?" His eyes searched mine, like he was looking for something I couldn't name. "What did you mean about me not being easy to know?" I hadn't planned to say that. It had just come out. "It just seemed like something a woman who was in love with you might say." He let go of my arm, looking disappointed. "Of course." Well, 46 minutes and 39 seconds done. Then, as he turned away, I saw a flash of something real under that armor he always wore. A crack in that perfect control that made me wonder, for the first time, what Victor Russo might be hiding, not from the world, but from himself. The next few days fell into a kind of uneasy routine. Victor left early every morning for his office downtown, and came back late most nights. We ate together sometimes, going over our fake history, talking about upcoming events 47 minutes and 9 seconds where I would be seen as his fiancée. We didn't really talk about personal stuff, but sometimes I caught him looking at me with a look I didn't understand. I spent my days in the studio he'd given me, which had everything I could want. Fancy paints, brushes, canvases in every size. At first, I just sat there, not knowing what to do after all those years of not being creative. Then, slowly, I started to sketch simple drawings of the view from the windows, 47 minutes and 40 seconds still lives of fruit from the kitchen. Slowly, the familiar movements came back. My muscles remembered what to do, and I lost myself in the work. One evening, about 3 weeks into our arrangement, I was in the studio when I felt someone behind me. I turned around and saw Victor standing in the doorway, watching me silently. I hadn't heard him come in. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked, putting down my brush. "A few minutes." His eyes went from me to the canvas, where I was working on a cityscape, San Francisco covered in fog, buildings 48 minutes and 13 seconds sticking out like islands in a gray sea. "You're talented." "I'm rusty," I said, feeling self-conscious. "It's been years." He walked into the room, looking at the canvas like he looked at everything, like he was judging it. "You capture the loneliness of the city, the isolation, even with millions of people around." I was surprised that he'd noticed, and that he'd put into words exactly what I was trying to show. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. He 48 minutes and 45 seconds looked around at the other canvases I'd done. Mostly studies. Nothing finished yet. "You should have a show when you have enough work." I laughed, and it sounded strange in that quiet room. Right? Unknown Waitress starts painting again. I'm sure galleries will be begging me. "You're underestimating the power of the Russo name," he said. Not like he was bragging, just stating a fact. As my fiancé, doors would open. The reminder of our arrangement, of my being just an accessory to his life, made the 49 minutes and 19 seconds warmth between us go away. "Did you need something?" I asked, wiping paint off my hands with a cloth. "Yes, we have an event tomorrow night, the annual gala for the Pacific Art Foundation. My family has been giving money to them for generations." He seemed to pick his words carefully. "It will be your first time in public as my fiancé. A lot of important people will be there, business partners, social connections." I must have looked anxious, because he added, "You'll be 49 minutes and 50 seconds fine. Just remember everything you've learned. And if I made a mistake," the memory of spilled coffee flashed through my mind. "You won't." His confidence was absolute. "Diana will brief you on who's who tomorrow. The car will be ready at 7 o'clock. He turned to leave, then paused. "Wear the blue dress, the one with the low back." After he left, I stared at the canvas, my earlier creative flow disrupted. Tomorrow would be the real test, not just convincing a loving grandmother, but an entire room of San Francisco's elite, people who would scrutinize every word, every gesture between us. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in the luxurious bed that still didn't feel like mine, rehearsing imaginary conversations, picturing all the ways I could expose our charade. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes, requiring the skilled administrations of the makeup artist Diana had arranged. The day passed in a blur of preparations. Hair, makeup, final adjustments to the dress Victor had specified. It was midnight blue silk that flowed like water, modestly cut in front, but dramatically dipping in back, revealing more skin than I was comfortable showing. When I was finally ready, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Polished, elegant, a convincing partner for a man like Victor DeRusso. He was waiting at the bottom of the grand staircase when I descended, his back to me as he checked his watch. At the sound of my approach, he turned, and for a fleeting moment, surprise registered on his face before his usual control reasserted itself. "You look," he paused, seeming to search for the appropriate word, "suitable." Despite myself, I felt a flicker of disappointment at the clinical assessment. "Thank you. You clean up nicely yourself." It was an understatement. In his perfectly tailored tuxedo, Victor was striking, powerful, commanding, undeniably handsome in a dangerous way that would turn heads even without his reputation. His mouth curved slightly at my comment. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fine fabric of his jacket. The security detail was waiting outside, 2 men in front, 2 behind. A protocol Victor had explained was non-negotiable for public events. The drive to the museum, where the gala was being held, was tense with anticipation, Victor using the time to give last-minute reminders about key attendees. "Remember," he said as we approached our destination, "tonight isn't just about appearances. There are people attending who might use any perceived weakness against me." "Against us," I echoed. His eyes met mine, intense in the dim light of the car. "Sentiment can be exploited, Emma. Be careful what you reveal." Before I could ask what he meant, we'd arrived. Camera flashes greeted us as we exited the car, local press documenting the arrivals of San Francisco's wealthy and powerful. Victor's hand settled at the small of my back, a possessive gesture that sent an involuntary shiver along my spine. His touch was warm against my exposed skin, firm as he guided me past the photographers and up the museum steps. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed with dramatic lighting, floral arrangements, and art installations. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played in the corner. The crowd was exactly as I'd imagined. Women dripping in jewels, men in expensive suits, an air of privilege as palpable as the perfume. Victor led me through the room, his hand never leaving my back. We were approached immediately, people gravitating toward him like moths to a flame. He made introductions smoothly, his public persona more charming than I'd seen in private, smiling, occasionally even laughing at the right moments, though the warmth never quite reached his eyes. "Victor, you've been keeping secrets," said a silver-haired man with the ruddy complexion of someone who enjoyed fine dining too much. "Where have you been hiding this lovely creature?" "Some treasures are worth keeping to oneself, Senator," Victor replied smoothly. "Emma, this is Senator James Barton." I smiled and extended my hand as I'd been taught. "It's a pleasure, Senator." "The pleasure is all mine," he replied, holding my hand a beat too long. "And how did you two meet? I don't recall seeing you at these functions before." I recited our practice story, watching the senator's face for any sign of disbelief, but he simply nodded, apparently accepting that Victor Russo had fallen suddenly, deeply in love with an unknown woman from outside his social circle. As the evening progressed, I met dozens more people. Business partners, social acquaintances, rivals thinly disguised as friends. I smiled until my cheeks ached, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, deflected personal questions with practiced ease. Through it all, Victor remained close, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. "You're doing well," he murmured during a brief moment alone, his lips close to my ear, sending another involuntary shiver through me. "Everyone keeps looking at us," I whispered back, "like they're waiting for something." "They are. They're waiting for the facade to crack, for some indication that this isn't real." His eyes locked with mine. "Don't give them that satisfaction." A woman approached, tall, willowy, with the kind of effortless beauty that suggested good genes and better surgeons. "Victor," she purred, air-kissing his cheek. "How lovely to see you, Sophia," he replied, an undercurrent in his voice I couldn't interpret. "I didn't expect you to be in town." "Surprise," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" "My fiancé," he corrected, his arms sliding around my waist. "Emma, this is my sister, Sophia Russo-Dequa." I managed to hide my shock. Victor had mentioned his sister lived in Europe with her husband. He hadn't said she'd be here tonight. "Fiancé?" Sophia's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. "How unexpected. And fast." "When you know, you know," Victor replied, the cliché sounding strange from his lips. Sophia's assessing gaze raked over me. "And where exactly did you meet my brother, Emma?" "He's notoriously private about his personal life." I repeated our cover story, maintaining eye contact despite her obvious skepticism. "How romantic," she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "And what did you do before becoming the future Mrs. Russo?" "I was a waitress," I answered honestly, chin lifting slightly. "At Bellini's in North Beach." Her laugh was like glass breaking, sharp, brittle. "A waitress, of course." She turned to Victor. "Mother will be thrilled. She always hoped you'd follow father's example and marry someone colorful." The barb hung in the air between us. Victor's arm tightened around my waist. "Emma is an artist," he said, his voice cool. "Quite talented. Perhaps if you're in town long enough you could see her work." Sophia's smile thinned. "Perhaps, though Alessandro and I are leaving tomorrow. Just a quick business trip." She glanced over her shoulder. "Speaking of, I should find my husband. Lovely to meet you, Emma. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. Family is so important to Victor." As she glided away, I felt Victor's tension radiating through his body. "You didn't tell me your sister would be here," I said quietly. "I didn't know." His expression had hardened, the public charm evaporating. "Sophia has her own agenda, always. She doesn't seem thrilled about our engagement. My sister's approval isn't relevant." He guided me toward the bar. "She and I have a complicated history." Before I could ask what he meant, we were intercepted by a tall man with salt and pepper hair and watchful eyes. Unlike the other guests, who approached with obvious agendas, this man simply nodded to Victor with something like grudging respect. "Russo, Detective Sullivan." Victor replied, his posture subtly changing, more alert, guarded. "I didn't expect to see you here. Fundraising efforts extend to all public servants these days." The detective's gaze shifted to me. "And this must be the fiancé I've heard about." Victor's introduction was terse. "Emma, this is Detective Michael Sullivan, San Francisco Police Department." The detective extended his hand, his grip firm. "Congratulations on your engagement, Miss Chun. Quite the whirlwind romance, from what I hear." Something in his tone, the slight emphasis on whirlwind, sent a warning prickling along my spine. "The best ones often are," I replied, forcing a smile. "And how are you enjoying life with Mr. Russo?" His eyes never left mine, assessing, probing. "Quite a change from waitressing, I imagine." The casual mention of my former occupation confirmed my suspicion. He'd been investigating me, investigating us. "Change can be good," I said carefully. "Indeed, though rapid changes sometimes indicate instability." Victor's hand settled on my lower back again, a subtle reminder of his presence. "Was there something specific you wanted, detective? Or are you simply enjoying the canapés?" Sullivan's attention shifted back to Victor. "Just making conversation. Always interesting to see who attends these functions." He nodded to someone across the room. "Enjoy your evening. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon." As he walked away, I felt a tremor start in my hands. "Is he after you?" Victor cut me off, his voice low. "We're being watched." He led me smoothly onto the dance floor, where other couples were already moving to the string quartet's waltz. His hands settled at my waist, the other taking mine as he drew me close. I followed his lead, grateful for the dance lessons Diana had arranged. "The detective?" I whispered, my lips close to his ear. "Is he investigating you?" "Sullivan has been trying to build a case against me for years," he replied, his breath warm against my hair. "Without success." "A case for what?" I pulled back slightly to see his face. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "You don't want to know." "I think I do if I'm involved." His jaw tightened. "You're not involved. You're playing a role. Remember, anything beyond that is not your concern." The dismissal stung more than it should have, right? Just the pretty accessory on your arm, asking no questions. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or frustration. His fingers tightened on my waist. "This isn't a game, Emma. These people, Sullivan included, are dangerous in ways you can't understand." "Then help me understand," I challenged, keeping my voice low. "You brought me into this world. At least tell me what I'm facing." The music swelled as he guided me in a turn, our bodies moving in perfect synchronization despite the tension between us. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then his expression shifted, resolve hardening his features. "My father didn't simply die," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the music. "He was murdered in front of me. I was 17. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Victor Sullivan was a rookie cop on the case. He's been obsessed with my family ever since." His eyes held mine, intense, unblinking. "There are sides to the city you've never seen, Emma. Powers and interests that operate in shadows. My father crossed the wrong people. I've spent my life ensuring I never make the same mistake." We continued to dance, his revelation hanging in the air between us. I studied his face, the hard lines, the carefully controlled expression, and suddenly saw the 17-year-old boy beneath, watching his father die, hardening himself against a brutal world. "I'm sorry," I said finally, the words inadequate but sincere. His expression softened fractionally. "Now you understand why this charade is necessary, why appearances matter. Weakness gets exploited, always." As the music ended, he drew me closer than necessary, his lips brushing my temple in what would appear to observers as an intimate gesture between lovers. "Trust no one here," he whispered. "Not even me." With that cryptic warning, he led me from the dance floor, his hand possessive at my back, his public smile firmly in place as we rejoined the glittering, dangerous crowd. The ride home from the gala was silent, the weight of Victor's revelation settling between us. His face was cast in shadow, his profile illuminated only by passing streetlights as he stared out the window, lost in thoughts he didn't share. The security detail seemed more alert than usual, one man constantly checking the mirrors, the other scanning side streets as we wound through the city. Something had shifted tonight, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what or when. When we arrived at the mansion, Victor finally spoke. "Come to my study." It wasn't a request. I followed him through the silent house to a room I'd never entered, one of the areas designated as private in our agreement. The security team remained outside as Victor closed the heavy door behind us. The study was different from the rest of the house, darker, more personal. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface organized with military precision. Behind it hung a painting I recognized immediately. A Francis Bacon, its distorted human figure screaming in silent anguish against a blood-red background. Victor poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses, handing one to me without asking if I wanted it. I accepted, taking a small sip of what turned out to be exceptionally fine scotch, warming my throat as it went down. "Sullivan was watching us tonight," he said, leaning against the desk rather than sitting behind it. "He's becoming more brazen." "Because of me?" I asked. "Because he doesn't believe our relationship." "Partly." Victor swirled the liquid in his glass. "He's also received new information, an informant from within my organization. A traitor." I translated. His mouth curved slightly. "You're learning our language. I'm adapting to survive." I met his gaze directly. "What does this mean for our arrangement?" "It means increased security. No public appearances without additional protection. No conversations about business matters, even here." He set his glass down. "It also means we need to be more convincing than ever." I thought we were already convincing. I remembered the detective's scrutiny, Sophia's skepticism. "Except to your sister, perhaps. Sophia has her own reasons for doubting me." Something dark crossed his features. "She believes I'm responsible for the failure of her first marriage." "Are you?" His eyes met mine, challenging. "Her husband was embezzling from my companies, using her to gain access. When I discovered it, I gave him a choice. Divorce or consequences. He chose divorce. And Sophia never forgave you," I guessed. "She accused me of controlling her life, of being unable to allow her any happiness that didn't align with my interests." His voice was even, but I sensed old pain beneath the words. Perhaps she was right. It was the most personal revelation he'd shared, a glimpse behind the armor he wore so completely. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Sophia may approach you, try to enlighten you about the man you're supposedly in love with." He picked up his glass again, drinking deeply. "I prefer you hear certain things from me first." "What things?" "My reputation, my business practices, the rumors about what happened to those who've crossed me." His eyes locked with mine. "Sullivan isn't the only one who believes I'm dangerous, Emma." A chill ran through me despite the scotch's warmth. "Are you, to your enemies?" "Yes." The simple admission hung in the air between us. "Does that frighten you?" I considered lying, then thought better of it. "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps people alert, alive." He set his empty glass down. "But you needn't fear me. Not as long as our arrangement stands. I protect what's mine even temporarily." The possessive claim should have offended me. Instead, I felt an unexpected flicker of heat at his words, at the intensity in his gaze as it held mine across the shadowed room. "There's something else," he continued. "My grandmother has invited us for dinner tomorrow night. A small family gathering. Your sister will be there, I guessed, along with her husband Alessandro, my mother and her current husband, and Sullivan's boss, Captain Reynolds of the SFPD, who happens to be married to my mother's cousin." His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Family connections are complicated in this city. A police captain related to your family? Isn't that a conflict of interest for investigations involving you?" "Reynolds has recused himself from anything directly concerning me. Not that it matters. Sullivan operates with considerable autonomy." Victor moved closer, his proximity sending my pulse racing inexplicably. "Tomorrow will be a test, Emma. Everyone at that table will be watching for inconsistencies, for cracks in our story." "No pressure," I murmured, taking another sip of scotch for courage. "You'll need to be perfect?" He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face in a gesture that could have been practiced for observers but felt oddly intimate in the empty room. "And you'll need to trust me, even when things might not make sense to you." His hand lingered near my face, his dark eyes searching mine. "Trust you for what?" I wasn't sure. Something shifted in the air between us, the careful distance we'd maintained dissolving in the shadowed study, replaced by a tension that made it difficult to breathe. "I should go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's late." His hand dropped, the moment, whatever it had been, broken. "Of course. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging." I left the study feeling unsettled, confused by my reaction to his proximity. This was a business arrangement, I reminded myself, nothing more. Any attraction I felt was merely a product of the situation. The forced intimacy, the danger, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps, was simply the result of playing a role so completely that the boundaries between fiction and reality began to blur. Sleep eluded me again that night. My dreams, when they came, filled with faceless threats, and Victor's warnings echoed through darkened corridors. Morning brought rain battering against the windows and a message from Diana that Victor had left early for his office downtown. The day stretched before me, hours to fill with anxiety about the evening ahead. I retreated to the studio, losing myself in painting as I often did when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Hours passed unmarked until Diana appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Russo called. The car will be ready at 6. I glanced at my paint-smeared hands, at the canvas where I'd been working without conscious direction, dark swirls of indigo and crimson surrounding a central figure in shadow. It wasn't until Diana left that I realized I'd been painting Victor as I'd seen him in his study, illuminated only by subtle lighting, power, and isolation radiating from his stance. Disturbed by what the painting might reveal about my subconscious, I cleaned my brushes and went to prepare for the evening. Victor was already waiting when I descended the stairs at precisely 6 o'clock, dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His eyes moved over me, taking in the burgundy dress I'd chosen, modest but elegant, and nodded his approval. "You look tense," he observed as we walked to the waiting car. "I'm about to have dinner with your family, a police captain, and your sister who clearly hates me, I replied. Tension seems appropriate. His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. They're more afraid of me than you are of them. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. In the car, he briefed me on the other dinner guests. His mother, Sophia the Elder, for whom his sister was named, a former beauty now in her 60s, married to Richard Tolmage, a corporate attorney 20 years her junior. Alessandro Diacqua, Sophia's French husband, involved in international shipping, and Captain James Reynolds, late 50s, career police officer with political ambitions. My mother will be cold initially, but don't take it personally, Victor said as we approached Nob Hill. She's territorial, especially about my grandmother's affections. And Captain Reynolds, will he be as suspicious as Sullivan? Reynolds is more politician than cop these days. He'll be cordial, observant, more interested in maintaining family peace than pursuing investigations. Victor's hand found mine, his thumb running over my knuckles in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. Stay close to me. Follow my lead. My heart raced as we pulled up to Elisa Russo's mansion. Tonight would be different from the gala. No crowd to lose ourselves in. Nowhere to retreat. Just intimate conversation around a dinner table with people who knew Victor better than anyone. Eliza greeted us in the formal dining room. Already seated at the head of the table, she looked frilier than before, her skin more translucent, but her eyes remained sharp as she took in our clasped hands. Vittorio, Emma. She smiled, genuine warmth in her voice. Come sit. The others are almost here. Victor guided me to a chair beside his grandmother, taking the seat on my other side. He kept my hand in his, visible on the table, a clear statement of connection that wasn't lost on the others when they arrived moments later. The introductions passed in a blur. Victor's mother, with her assessing gaze so similar to his own. Her husband, handsome in a polished way. Sophia and Alessandro, a striking couple radiating European sophistication. Captain Reynolds, whose friendly demeanor couldn't quite mask the cop's watchful eyes. Conversation flowed with the wine, carefully neutral topics at first, then gradually shifting toward more personal territory as the meal progressed. I felt myself being observed, evaluated from all sides. So, Emma, Victor's mother said during a lull, her voice carrying the faintest accent, my son tells me you're an artist. Have you exhibited your work? Not recently, I admitted. I took some time away from painting. And what brought you back to it? She pressed. I glanced at Victor before answering truthfully. Your son. He provided a studio, encouragement, the space to create again. How generous! Sophia interjected, her tone suggesting otherwise. My brother has always been inquisitive about art and artists. Victor's hand tightened around mine. Emma has genuine talent, Sophia. You should see her work. Perhaps we will at the wedding, Captain Reynolds said pleasantly. Speaking of which, have you set a date? The question hung in the air. Victor and I hadn't discussed this detail in our fabricated story. Not yet, Victor answered smoothly. Emma wished to finish her current collection first. I'm learning patience. His mother laughed, the sound brittle. Patience has never been your strong suit, Vittorio. Not since you were a boy. People change, Mama, he replied. Do they? She challenged, her gaze moving between us. I wonder. Eliza tapped her water glass lightly. Enough, Sophia. Can't you see they're happy? That's all that should matter to a mother. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by Alessandro clearing his throat. Emma, Victor mentioned you're originally from San Francisco. Where did you grow up? I answered his questions about my background, conscious of how my modest upbringing contrasted with the privilege surrounding this table. Yet, as I spoke of my parents, their small business, their emphasis on education despite limited means, I saw something like recognition in Eliza's eyes. Your parents sound like good people, she said when I finished. Like my own. We came to this country with nothing, you know. My father worked on the docks. My mother cleaned houses for rich women in Pacific Heights. She reached across to pat my hand. Sometimes I think Vittorio needs someone who remembers what it means to build something from nothing. The conversation shifted again, moving to business matters, city politics. I felt Victor relax slightly beside me as attention turned away from us. Under the table, his hand found my knee, a silent gesture of solidarity, or maybe a warning to remain alert. After dinner, the men retreated to the library for brandy while the women remained at the table. It was an old-fashioned separation of the sexes that struck me as surprisingly antiquated, though Victor's eyes conveyed a clear message as he left the room. Be careful. Well, Sophia said once the men were gone, now we can really talk. Her mother shot her a warning look before turning to me. You must forgive my daughter. She's just protective of her brother. Protective? Sophia scoffed. I'm trying to save this poor woman from a situation she doesn't even understand. She leaned toward me conspiratorially. Has he told you what he really does? Who he really is? Sophia, enough. Eliza's voice was quiet but held a commanding edge. No, Nona. She should know what family she's marrying into. Sophia's eyes seemed to bore into mine, probing for weakness. My brother isn't the businessman he pretends to be. Ask yourself why a detective seems to constantly be following his movements, why people actually fear him. I know who Victor is, I said, meeting her challenging gaze steadily. Do you really? She challenged. Did you know about Mateo Bianca or Thomas Chun? No relation to you, I assume. Both business associates who mysteriously disappeared after disagreements with my brother. Speculation and rumors. Victor's mother interjected, her voice firm. Nothing more than gossip. Is it speculation that fathers warn their daughters about him? That even in this city with all its corruption, his name makes people nervous? Sophia's voice became sharper, her agitation evident. He's using you, Emma, for whatever twisted game he's playing. And when it's over, you'll be discarded like everyone else who has served their purpose. That's enough. Eliza's hand struck the table with surprising force, silencing her daughter. Not another word, Sophia. I sat perfectly still, absorbing Sophia's accusations, seeing the tension etched on both older women's faces. Whatever the truth was, it clearly ran deeper and was more complex than I could have ever imagined. I love your son, I said to Victor's mother, the lie coming easily now, rolling smoothly off my tongue. Whatever he may or may not have done doesn't change the way I feel. Something akin to respect flickered in her eyes, a fleeting acknowledgement. Love is never simple in this family. No, I agreed, understanding dawning on me. I'm beginning to understand that. When the men returned, I saw Victor immediately catalog the tension radiating in the room. His eyes moved from his sister's flushed face to my carefully composed one, silently taking in the scene. Questions danced in his gaze, questions that I answered with a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Not now. The evening concluded shortly after with formal goodbyes and Eliza extracting promises for another visit in the very near future. As we drove away, Victor waited until we were several blocks from the house, safely out of earshot, before speaking. What did Sophia say to you? She mentioned some names. Mateo Bianca, Thomas Chun. I watched his profile, studying him intently, looking for any flicker of a reaction. She implied they disappeared after disagreements with you. His expression remained impassive, unreadable. And you're wondering if it's true, is that it? He was silent for so long that I began to think he wouldn't answer me at all. Then, finally, he spoke. Bianca relocated to Argentina after certain tax issues came to light. Chen's gambling debts finally caught up with him. He fled to Taiwan to escape his creditors. Neither disappearance had anything to do with me directly. Directly? I repeated, latching onto the word. Victor turned to face me fully, his gaze intense. What do you want from me, Emma? Confession? Absolution? You knew what kind of man I was, or at least you should have, when you agreed to this arrangement. Did I? The question escaped before I could consciously stop it. I knew you were powerful, controlling. I didn't know you might be dangerous. I told you that myself, he finished for me, his voice low. You chose not to hear it. The stark truth of his words stung. I had consciously ignored the signs, the warnings, choosing to focus instead on the financial security he offered me. The chance to paint again, the fleeting glimpses of humanity that peeked out from behind his controlled exterior. Do you want out? He asked, his voice suddenly quiet, almost vulnerable. "Say the word, and the car will take you back to your apartment tonight. The arrangement ends, no strings attached. You keep what you've earned so far." The offer surprised me, throwing me off balance. I looked at him, really looked at the harsh lines of his face softened by the dim light, the shadows playing across his features, at the careful distance in his eyes that couldn't quite mask something deeper, something more complex. In that moment, I realized two truths simultaneously. Victor Russo was indeed dangerous, possibly even the criminal his sister so vehemently believed him to be. And despite everything, despite all the red flags and warning bells, I wasn't ready to walk away. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. "I made a commitment. 6 months. Relief flickered across his features, so brief, so subtle, that I might have imagined it. "Good." The rest of the drive passed in complete silence, thick with unspoken words. When we reached the mansion, Victor escorted me inside, his hand resting at the small of my back in what had become a familiar, almost intimate gesture. In the grand foyer, he paused, stopping me. "Thank you," he said, the words sounding foreign and almost awkward on his lips. "For tonight, for not walking away." "Why does it matter?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You could find someone else, someone more like you." The simple statement hung heavily between us, laden with implications that neither of us was quite prepared to fully examine or dissect. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, his hand lifting to my face. His fingers traced the delicate curve of my cheek with unexpected gentleness, a surprisingly tender touch. My breath caught in my throat as his eyes searched mine, looking for something that I couldn't quite name, but suddenly desperately wanted him to find within me. "Emma," he said, my name almost a whisper on his lips, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. Whatever might have happened next, whatever unspoken desires might have been acted upon, was abruptly interrupted by the sharp, insistent ring of his phone. He pulled away from me, breaking the spell, checking the screen, his expression hardening, snapping back into his usual guarded demeanor. "I have to take this," he said, all business again, the moment of vulnerability gone. "Good night, Emma." I watched him walk away, confusion and something dangerously close to longing coursing through me. This wasn't part of our carefully constructed arrangement. These stolen moments of connection, the complicated emotions that were taking root despite my best efforts to maintain a strictly professional distance. That night I dreamed of Victor, not the cold, controlled businessman that he presented to the world, but the man I'd glimpsed beneath the carefully constructed armor. The man whose touch lingered on my skin even hours later. I woke up tangled in sheets, breathless and strangely unsettled, wondering if I was foolishly falling into a trap entirely of my own making. 3 months passed in a similar pattern, a carefully orchestrated dance. Public appearances where we played our roles to perfection, fooling everyone around us, private moments of unexpected connection that never quite crossed the defined line of our arrangement. I continued painting, producing work that surprised even me with its intensity, its raw exploration of power and vulnerability, shadows and light. Victor provided a steady stream of encouragement, sometimes even watching me work in silent, thoughtful appreciation. His grandmother's condition continued to deteriorate, leading to weekly visits that became increasingly difficult and emotionally draining as she visibly weakened before our eyes. Through it all, the carefully constructed charade continued. Victor, the devoted grandson, me, the loving fiancé, our fabricated romance bringing a measure of comfort to a dying woman. Detective Sullivan remained a shadowy presence in our lives, occasionally appearing at events, always watching from a distance, a silent observer. Victor's security tightened further, with additional men stationed around the property, accompanying us whenever we left the grounds. I learned to live with the constant surveillance, to move through the world hyper-aware of potential threats that I couldn't see, but that Victor seemed to somehow anticipate. Then came the night that changed everything, the night the carefully constructed facade began to crumble. I was alone in the mansion, Victor away on what he'd described vaguely as business travel to Chicago. 3 security men remained on the property, diligently patrolling the perimeter, while Diana had left for the evening after ensuring that I had everything I needed. I was in the studio working late, lost in my art, when the power suddenly went out. One moment the room was brightly lit, the next it was plunged into complete darkness, save for the faint, ethereal moonlight streaming in through the tall windows. I froze, brush still clutched in my hand, listening to the sudden, deafening silence. No hum of electricity, no distant sounds of the security's radios crackling. Something was terribly wrong. Victor had briefed me for situations just like this, specific protocols to follow in case of an emergency. I reached instinctively for my cell phone to call the emergency number he'd given me, only to discover that there was no signal. The lines were jammed. Heart pounding in my chest, I moved silently to the studio door, carefully peering out into the darkened hallway. Nothing. I slipped off my paint-splattered shoes, wanting to move as quietly as possible, and began cautiously making my way toward the panic room that Victor had shown me on the lower level of the house. I'd nearly reached the main staircase when I heard it. The soft, sickening thud of a body hitting the floor, followed by muffled voices speaking in a language that I didn't recognize. Intruders inside the house, past the security detail. Pressed tightly against the cold wall, I inched slowly toward a decorative alcove that might provide some temporary hiding. As I moved, a floorboard creaked loudly beneath my foot. A small sound, but in the oppressive silence, it might as well have been a gunshot, shattering the stillness. The voices immediately stopped talking. Footsteps approached, growing louder with each passing second. I held my breath, trying to remain as still as possible, calculating the distance to the nearest exit in my mind, knowing deep down that I wouldn't make it there in time. A beam of light cut through the inky darkness, sweeping across the hallway, searching. It was only a matter of seconds before it found me. In that moment, with strange, almost detached clarity, I realized something that I had been consciously denying for months. Whatever twisted game Victor Russo was playing, whatever unseen dangers surrounded him, I had become far more than just a temporary player in his dangerous world. Somewhere along the way, somewhere between the elaborate lies and the fleeting moments of raw truth, between the carefully constructed performances and the quiet, intimate moments, I had irrevocably fallen in love with the complex, dangerous man who had so completely upended my life with spilled coffee and an impossible, life-altering proposal. The beam of light inched closer, and I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the inevitable. Victor's name formed on my lips like a silent prayer.